welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out on the last day of the show, and we promise to make it worthwhile. We'll try to be educational yet entertaining here. I'm honored to be joined by a couple of terrific panelists, and I know that because I've been on separate panels with both of you before, and this will be lots of fun. So I'm Chris Lennon with Ross Video, and we're here to talk about an issue that I think is fairly ubiquitous in the media business now. The fact that we're getting more and more streaming providers popping up. It seems like daily, probably actually is daily. This is getting to the point where it's becoming unmanageable the way we've dealt with it in the past. So, live streaming is nothing new, but I think the scale to which it's gotten it kind of is new, and it's really gotten to the point where I think it's reached critical mass where we have a problem that we need to deal with if we're going to be managing these in a little more efficient way and have the flexibility to be able to stand up and take down these streams quicker and more flexibly. So with that, let's do a quick introduction of my fellow panelists here, starting with Loic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Loic Borbou, the chief architect for Bloomberg Media. One thing that Chris said is, there's a lot of streams going on. There's a lot of changes happening in that space. I'm living the dream of dealing with that problem on a daily basis. And we're going to get into a lot of those details in terms of what that dream is about and how we can actually wake up from it.
Is it actually more of a nightmare?
Let's see. Yeah.
Well, I think it is a nightmare for you. I'm Dan Moot, CTO at IBM, and we're the trade association for the vendors in the industry. And we do a lot of research as well, and Chris is going to go through a few of the slides on that. But there is no question that as this came up within our study groups, this really turned up as a big issue that's got to be solved.
Yeah, that's always the first thing when you start any of these activities. Let's make sure there actually is a problem to be solved here, right? And that became evident really, really quickly, that it is a problem that seems to be widespread and common among all of the large content owners that we have out there today. And with this changing landscape, it's getting increasingly challenging. And so I happened to sit in on a session that Stan did a couple of weeks ago at IBC that had some really interesting stats and slides about this whole area. And so I asked if I could steal or plagiarize those slides. And let's actually throw some of these up here, Stan, because some of these figures and developments that you came up with, I thought they were shocking to me, and I like to think that I'm up to speed on this stuff. So, Stan, you want to speak to this first one?
Well, this was kind of a surprise to me as well. So this is particularly geared towards the TV screen at home in your living room. And when I was looking at this stat, I went, well, actually, if you go back and you look at July's stat, YouTube was number one. And you're thinking YouTube is watching these people on their living room TV. And that was a real surprise. Obviously, this is August stat, and it makes perfect sense. Of course, people are watching the Olympics. But again, when you look at that, you didn't expect that. So that is just showing you streaming.
So this is definitely an aberration. When we look at this a couple months down the road, almost certainly YouTube is going to be up back on number one, which, I mean, we all take that for granted, right? That YouTube would probably be number one on our mobile devices. But the fact that it's number one in viewing in your living room, absolutely floored me, and it points to the fact that we're in a I was going to say in a changing world, but we're in a changed world. It already has changed.
Yeah, we are in a changing, no question about that. Of course, we're dealing with pretty well everything. A lot of the stuff on the chart here was not live streaming. They're really focusing on even the Olympics. There was part of the Olympics that was live streaming. With the time zone, it obviously was a little bit different, but it's really just showing the trend that the viewers are fickle. They're not tied up into any one system or one setup anymore.
Loyalty is a thing of the past, I suppose.
I'm sure you're seeing that as well, Loic.
I mean, that's that's key in terms of those platforms, the one that, are listed on the slide there. I mean, YouTube, we get Amazon that is there as well. Very, very large platforms that you have to find a way to interact with, to integrate with the system. And, part of this is, they don't speak the same language. So the way you actually set up your distributions is very different from one to the other. And that's, basically why we're sitting here today.
That's the problem at hand. So Stan, equally interesting. Also, so this is showing that.
Well, this shows that, back in July, YouTube was number one.
Yeah. And so this is to me, this is the real reality we're dealing with, right? Without the Olympic blip, for NBCU. All right. So, I don't know if people here are aware of this, but the IABM puts out this really cool technology and trends roadmap every year. It looks like an eye chart here, and it's because that's a teaser for you to go and hit the QR code and get the full version of it. But this is something that Stan and his team put together, and it's really very appropriate for the things we're talking about here. I was going to advance it down to here. Stan, you want to kind of take it away on the applicability of what you're seeing in terms of trends in the industry and how it touches on this?
Right. So excuse me. So what we do with this is, I have a team that's worldwide, that's really focused on this. It's a combination of end users and vendors, and everyone really has specific interest in different parts of this. So we take about 40 different technologies, and we group them into a dozen or so groups and plot it on the technology adoption curve so you can see where that's going, based on whether or not you're doing create or play out or production or things like that. But one of the areas that's really important, and I always like to start with this, is security. We originally put security down. People were focusing only on content security, meaning stored content. So we move over to secure workflows. We really need secure architectures.
And Loic, this was something I think when you first brought this problem to be solved to us, and really as the work of the group has morphed and become active, security has become really, unexpectedly to me at least, number one priority. That if we don't solve the security issues here, we haven't really solved any of the problems.
Well, I think in the scenario that we've exposed there of, there's all of those different places where you're distributing your content today. There's all of those other places that you want to distribute your content, and all of those configurations are one of. Obviously, security is a problem because there's not a standardized way of configuring and securing your content. And I think let's maybe step back a little bit. So when this is something that is really affecting, my ability to sleep at night, knowing that, there's all those problems, there's all those security holes that exist in those distribution. When I went to Chris and I said, "Hey, Chris, we have an issue in the industry there. Can you help me with this?" And I started to expose some of the problem that I was seeing. Chris' reaction was, "Okay, let's try to do something about this. It is a real problem." Then we got into a room in New York. That was a while ago. And we did a call for participations in terms of live streams and problem with live streams. I was very surprised by the number of people that decided to come to those meetings on the media side, on the vendor side. And not only they were attentive to the message, but they were surprised as well that all those problems existed. So now that the bottle has been opened and that we shared all of those potential problems that exist with the technology that we are all using today, well, we need to do something about it. Okay. And the participation on those calls and the investment that has been done since we started this, I think has been quite amazing.
And I'll just speak, my personal observation here. It totally shocked me when we had actually, Loic didn't dive into the detail of really, he's just like, "Trust me, we have a major security hole here." We had one of the other major media companies, I won't say who it was, actually put up on the screen and said, let me show you how easy this is, to get at these live streams. And it was absolutely shocking to me that the hole was something you could drive a semi through. It was crazy.
Well, let's make that clear though. It's the live streams, but it's not at the final point of going to the consumer.
No.
Before it even gets to that point.
Yeah. And to be clear, what we're talking about here is from the content owners, the content producers to the streaming providers that you saw on the last slide. That's the area where, we're really focusing on.
And there's a reason for it. There is not today a standard configurations that everyone can agree on. So as an example, the way you will configure your infrastructure to send a stream to YouTube, that is the number one there, is very different than Amazon TV. It's also very different than any of the other third parties. So you're creating all of those one-off. You have deadlines to basically to set up this infrastructure. And there's complexity that goes on both sides in making it work from a stream format point of view, a stream protocol, and a stream security. Security being by far the hardest one to tackle here. So what actually happened? Well, we look the other way.
And so how have we gotten to the point that we're at now, particularly in terms of security? Is it because these streaming services wanted to make things as simple as possible from their perspective and not put security barriers as they saw them in place, or was it something else?
I think it's a byproduct of the progress that has been made in those technology. Okay. Number one, it used to be that you will be able to follow the path of distribution by following the cable. You can't do that anymore. Okay. Second, cloud infrastructure. To set up a new streaming infrastructure, you can do that in a span of minutes or hours, depending on how your automation will work. But even if you are not familiar with the technology, you can pretty much easily do that without incurring a very high cost. When you do this, you're going to take shortcuts. And those shortcuts have to do with some selection process in this configuration that basically may not be clear to you, but will expose some of the security holes. When you decide to interact with another system, you have to agree on a language that you both understand. You have to agree on how you're going to carry the data. So you have to agree on the stream format, on the stream protocol, and those things even are typically not standardized. So there's a long list of options that you have. And if I talk to this group over there, or if I talk to that group over there, I'm going to find what I have in common. Your list is going to be different than mine. It's going to be different than yours. So you're going to try to figure it out what actually you can use in order to make it work. It would be so much easier if we had some type of agreement on the list of possible options that are define a set of best practices, but also to quantify, what is secure, what is less secure, what is better from a resiliency point of view. Those things don't really exist today.
So Loic, as a group that actually streaming things out to providers that ultimately are doing the final streaming, don't you have the say so in what you're using? Or does everyone ask you for something different?
So I have the phone number for YouTube. I'm going to have you calling YouTube and says, what you do is not secure. And you're going to see what they're going to say. So because I call them.
What you're saying is everybody's different.
Yeah. In some cases, you have some leverage. In most cases, you don't. The only way we can actually make this work is by sitting on a stage, getting some agreements from the media organizations, from the vendor, and says, we're going to make this better.
And it's funny to me to think that, we're talking about large corporations here who own the content. People like Bloomberg or NBCU or ABC Disney, these are not small organizations. But when you compare them to Google and Amazon, they are, right? And so I think, maybe that's part of, again, why we end up in the situation that we're in, that organizations who perhaps in the past were used to being able to dictate this sort of thing are perhaps not in the position anymore to be able to dictate, and they're being dictated to, in a lot of cases, by the receivers. Is that fair to say that?
I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, because if you go back in the day, in the early 80s, C-band distribution of pay TV, HBO went out to every cable head end and said, your equipment wasn't good enough for distributing our signal. That's long gone.
Yeah. It's scary how much things have changed. One thing I do want to just jump in before we continue here is this will be even more interesting for everybody and for us. If you have questions, please feel free to throw your hand up and become like a virtual part of this panel. Okay. So if thoughts are creeping into your head,
virtual real part of this panel.
Yeah, exactly. So again, because you're not up here, we'd love to have you be part of the discussion here. Speaking of that, I was trying to put myself in your shoes in the audience. And as we were talking about the nature of this problem and the security aspects, if I was in the audience, I would, again, I'm sometimes guilty of jumping to the solution space a little too quickly, but I would have thrown a buzzword right out at us. What about blockchain? Isn't blockchain at least an answer to part of this? It just seems like a natural thing, right? Where you've got people who can jump in and maybe we can secure this better. Is that a potential solution?
Well, we're not saying no to the use of any technology to make this better, just to be clear. Okay. Right now, I think one of the fundamental problem is the fact that we are using, in some cases, some technology that is not appropriate in order to configure the streams there. Yes, you're going to have a firewall, you're going to have an IP address, but you will have to change that so many times in order to create, configurations that would be secure all the time. So you end up basically avoiding it because you will be breaking things all the time. Okay. There is one point that I want to make that describes kind of why we even ended up with those problems with some of the big guys that we mentioned there. YouTube and Amazon, they were not in the live business, as, content distributor. YouTube started with basically all of us uploading video of a cat, jumping from a cocktail table to a couch. Yeah, that's how it started. Amazon, they had videos with that were more like long form content, but now they're getting into live. The fact that those platforms are so big, they're also dictating kind of what they want. And we have to be on the receiving side of it and say, okay, well, if we want a content on those platforms, we basically have to do what you're telling us to do. Okay.
But you can still have maybe some best practices around that we can hopefully all agree to and simplify this in the community in general, right?
Well, part of that is also making things better for them. And if we can come together around a table and says, hey, we can change that, not a big shift, okay, but it will allow, the content creators, the distributors, and, all of the entities that are receiving that content to come up to a common goals and a strategy that works in terms of stream configuration, stream management, and stream security.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. You just mentioned 3 points, right? Initially, it sounds like we're talking about security only, but really, you've got the other 2 points that are extremely important. Security is obviously the thing we discussed first, but it's the other format.
Stan, I threw up another one of your slides here. I hope you don't mind. Found this somewhat interesting. You want to speak to this for a sec?
Yeah, I think when we look at this, we're looking at new revenue sources, and we kind of see this where subscriptions took a dive for a little while. Maybe people were tired, whatever. I think that all comes down to churn rate, and then it started picking up again. The other aspect on this as well is, of course, where advertising fits in this, and that is again driving it. And if we look at the number of fast channels we're running in the U.S., it's like 2,900 fast channels, I think, when I look back, and you may have a slide up on that. Anyway, it's on there. Okay. Anyway, it's incredible the amount of fast channels that have come up on that.
You might be right that it's 2,900. It was 1,900 in May.
Yeah.
Maybe it is 2,900 now.
Yeah.
That's how quickly
it's really moved.
And this stunned me, Stan, when I first saw this. That I don't know if anybody in the audience would guess that there's this many fast channels out there in the U.S. alone. We're not talking about the world. And this is something that's really just come up over the last few years. I mean, it was, if you were to extend this back to pre-pandemic times, it was.
You hardly had any.
Yeah.
And when we end up with fast channels, of course, some are doing live, some aren't doing live. I think one of the big issues we're dealing with some of the fast channels is they don't use STE or STE inserts, inserts at all for ads. They just go, oh, I've been running for 4.5 minutes, time for an ad.
And it shows.
And it really does show. I think that moves some people over to the premium side. We have a question.
Yeah. Question is, what does FAST stand for? It's yet another acronym that we've got here. I'll take a cut at it. It's free ad-supported streaming channels, basically. Yeah. So it's where you have the new lower tiers available, right? On a lot of these subscription services, let's say, I'll give it to you for free. You let me serve you ads, or some of the models are purely ad supported and they don't rely on a subscription at all. And, to me, it's been quite surprising. The initial uptick was all, subscription based services, but that's not really the case anymore. And it actually surprises me because a lot of people said, I'm going to go to subscription based services because I'm tired of seeing ads. And then they got tired of spending $100 or $200 across all these various streaming services. They're like, well, maybe the ads aren't so bad.
Well, the area where you're going to find really a lot of the fast channels that are getting a lot of tractions are within the TV manufacturers themselves. So if you buy any TV today, you don't connect it to anything except the internet, you're going to have some type of TV guide on there. And on there, there's going to be a lot of channels. And a lot of them, this is probably the first time that you even seen them. But there's been really an explosion of it. We've been creating configurations for most of those fast channels for the big TV manufacturer. And once again, this has been one of those journey where we've been trying to educate them in what we should and shouldn't do. But if you want to be on there, you kind of have to follow whatever standard they put together. And in some cases, those standards are maybe not fully baked. I'm not going to give any names here, but I know what's behind the curtain. Where, you're setting up a stream, you're setting up your profiles, the way the ads are being set up. It really feels like a house of cards in some cases. Okay. And it can be done a lot better, but guess what? It's working on the end. For them, it's like it's part of selling a TV. I'm providing that information to you. I am not, being a content distributor is not my primary line of business. I'm making TVs. I'm giving you that stuff. You can use it if you want. If it doesn't work, if you don't want it, then be it. But what we are really seeing in the last couple of months is, there's been a huge amount of viewership on those platforms, bigger than we expected, where it's actually moving the needles in terms of the revenue that we're making on certain channels. So it's interesting that something that was seen as, okay, we're going to do that to make people happy. But in this case, it's actually working.
All right, we've got a question here. Yeah, there's a mic for you there.
You might have answered my question in your last sentence, but at the beginning you were talking about Amazon and YouTube as having all the leverage compared to the big media companies. But if there are almost 3,000 fast channels out there, I can't believe that every single one of those channels has the same power over media as Amazon and YouTube. So I guess my question is, I have two questions. Are all those almost 3,000 fast channels, does that mean there's 3,000 different protocols you have to follow, or is there a commonality to some of those thousands of channels? And if there is there a common approach to them? And is there also a way for media to collectively get behind a common approach and equalize the playing field in terms of leverage and bring some commonality?
I'm going to jump in there with one answer, and then I'll let you answer the other one. First of all, we've got a lot of fast channels, as we mentioned, and where that fits. But we don't have that many service providers that are delivering those channels. So that cuts down the playing field very quickly. Go ahead, Loic.
So let's take the TV manufacturer in that given example there. In order to integrate with some of them, you have to implement some of their specifications. One particular TV manufacturer has an integration document that is 273 pages long. Okay. And it's not...
That's why you come in the office red-eyed?
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Yeah. And what is actually listed in there, it's basically not one way, but it's, several ways of configuring things, and you have to stay within some boundaries. Okay. One of the episodes that we had was, we wanted to do 4K UHD as a distribution. That was not part of the specification. So we actually worked directly with that TV manufacturer to try to make this work. So you're dealing with a large number of engineers on their side. Their response to our question was, we're going to try it. If it works, we're going to go with it. I was a bit surprised and shocked by this because, typically when you actually create something that is new, you want to test it for a long time. You want to bake it. You want to make sure that, you dot all the I's and you cross all the T's. And the reaction was, we're going to try it. If it works, we're going to keep it like that. And guess what we did? We kept it like that. And that integration is actually breaking a protocol that we're all using, that is HLS. But it has become the de facto for most of the integration with TV providers for 4K delivery today. One did it, and the other one followed. From a streaming format, it is a broken HLS. From a security, this is where they're still doing it in a different way. You're passing that same water to the pipe, but the pipe is being connected in a different ways. And that's something that, based on their infrastructure investment, they have more or less capabilities. I have to say that some of those content distributors, I'm talking about the TV manufacturers or even other platforms, sometimes they won't let you interact with them directly. You have to use a third party, and that third party may be the problem.
And so let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into, and this is what you were actually asking, Rebecca. I think in the kind of the second part of your question is what's really the nature of the problem? What are these variables that we're talking about? And again, this was something that when we dove into it, it surprised me the number of variables that we had. It brings up the old joke that the great thing about standards is that we've got so many of them. But you talk about, if you just look at protocols here that you're using it in just point-to-point distribution, it's an alphabet soup, and I'm sure this is not a comprehensive list of everyone that you at least have to deal with at Bloomberg.
That's actually just one of the categories. That's a point-to-point. there's two other categories that are on top of that. And you can do the exercise of connecting the dots here in every possible ways that give you some ideas. I must say that we're going to take a single channel, so the same content that is distributed to all those places. The number of variations is a 3-digit number, and the first number is not a 1.
And I would imagine this is even worse. Or again, somebody like a NBCU or a Disney ABC. This doesn't get better with other organizations, but you guys are probably fairly typical, I would imagine.
Well, we distribute our content worldwide, and I think that's one of the reasons where you see the maturity of different of the distributor, that they're not all great, but there's still a high and a low based on the geographical area. So
I have a question in the audience, if we can get the microphone over here.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you. So you start off with the security part. That's what most interesting to me as a content creator. So what do we do to help you guys make sure that the security part is the main focus? Because that's something that we're more, most important to me. What you guys say, I mean, all this stuff is important, but how do we help make sure that this is pushed to wherever it has to get pushed, so that security is definitely one of the biggest?
Joining the team.
I'm going to let you take that, Lloyd.
Well, we need hands. Okay. I mean, the working group that we created here is basically we need brand power and we need hands. And basically, the louder the voice, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, and so let's just talk about the working group.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's extremely important. So Cynthia has the RIS, Rapid Industry Standard group that really focuses on doing this. Chris really initiated this effort, and we try not to, within the working group, we try not to, as Chris says, boil the ocean, pick little pieces and then get them standardized, put them through the standardization process. So it's actually very quick. It's not like years of going on. And within that, we brainstormed through things. And when this came up and Lloyd brought up this idea, we went, oh my goodness, there's too many pieces here. How can we do little pieces? Do you want to jump in there a little bit more about the group?
Yeah, and that's the whole idea. Rapid Industry Solutions, rapid is the key here. This is not a problem that we can take 5 years to fix, right? This is a problem here and now, and it's getting worse. It's not an exaggeration to say daily. So I think, how can you help? I think, we could, again, this is not a problem that one media producer provider can solve on their own, because you have a very small voice compared to a lot of these people who are getting these live streams. So we think the answer is to have a collective voice in an industry group like this, where we can all circle around, and really what we're trying to come up with. Don't jump to the conclusion that because this is under SIMPTE that we're looking at doing standardization. We're not. We're not naive enough to think that we can build a standard that all these people are just going to say, oh, that's brilliant, great, we're going to do it. We're aiming at, I think, a much more realistic lower bar of let's just come up with some realistic best practices that we can agree on that are reasonable for people to adopt. We can't force them, right? We can't force Amazon, YouTube, or even these 2,000 fast channels to necessarily adopt what we're doing. But if what we're doing is accomplishable in a reasonable way and it's fairly pragmatic, then I think and it has many voices behind it, and that's why we've got the user community, the content owner, the content producer community, then also the vendor community from IABM involved in this. If we can all get together and have one voice to say, we all have this problem and here's a reasonable way to solve it, I think we have a chance of at least improving it. I'm under no illusions that we're going to fix this in 6 months, but can we make it better? I think we can.
Peel a little bit off. We have a question in the front row here.
So in a similar vein, in getting people outside of the server room interested, in this stuff. Can you envision a way where you can get end consumers interested in it? I'm thinking of filmmaker mode, right? The idea is we're delivering the faithful original vision, right? Well, I can see content security being the same way. I want to know that my Disney content has not been altered in transit. So I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to consumer potentially driving demand for this.
So that's actually, it's part of this. Okay. We're not trying to create, and I don't like the word standard. I like the word best practices. And that's what we want to create here. A set of best practices that can be used by the content producer, by the content distributors, and everyone in the middle. That if you're going to be doing this is what we recommend. We believe that if enough people, enough entities are going to basically bringing this up, then this is how we're going to be able to move the needle. The vendors that are sitting on these floors also understand that. And they're like, well, if our customer wants it, we're going to do it. Okay, it starts there as well. And in terms of what needs to be done from a technical point of view, we have solutions. This is not something where we need to go back to square one and say, we're going to reinvent the wheel there. The wheel exists. We just have to make it spin in the right direction. So it's not really something that is impossible from a technical point of view. It's not impossible from a process point of view. And, let's just expose it, push it in all the direction that we can, and then have this becoming something that let me sleep at night. Okay?
Well, one of the biggest issues from the content point of view is actually delivering the metadata. Everybody wants different metadata, and on top of that, people say, oh, I'm distributing the audio and video. Well, hang on here. I need to even put that in my guide. I mean, metadata is really missing out on this. What do you have on this next slide here, Chris?
So I was going to point out, Loic had said, the problem was actually worse than what we showed on that previous slide. That was just for what we term point-to-point distribution, right? Where, for instance, Bloomberg is sending a stream to YouTube, right, directly. Maybe it's not the best example, but an example. Versus if we're going through like a CDN type of arrangement, we have something that we're calling origin distribution, and you might think that the problem doesn't exist so much there, but I think it's just as acute, right?
I think it's worse. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're pessimistic.
I am. Yeah.
You would think going with a CDN type of approach, it would have the opportunity to be better. And so how has that actually become worse than you think? Point to point is you've got more destinations, right? So more opportunities to get it wrong.
Well, not really, because we're talking about still B2B distribution. So you're telling someone who's going to consume that stream that is not a consumer but a redistribution platform, hey, take that stream. And guess what? It's an HLS stream. It's a DAS stream. There's an origin there. So they treat that as basically a point-to-point, but their capabilities of connecting to a secure HLS or secure DAS stream is fairly limited. And, I made a statement a while ago, and it seems that I've touched a nerve there. I said, give me any streams for any content provider from any content creators. Give me 15 minutes and I will be able to find a way to access that stream. To this day, I've been able to win that bet every single time.
Yeah, I hope you all find that as shocking and disturbing as I do. As people who, the whole value of what we do is the content, right? And if it's not being secured on the way to these streaming providers, it's quite terrifying, and I can't imagine a more urgent problem for us to solve as an industry than that. Because again, it speaks to the heart of our business, right? The whole value of everything. I don't want to go through a lot of this, but just to show the the nature of the problem. So you got all kinds of formats out there, from SD to HD to 4K to 8K, HDR, non-HDR, wide color gamut, all this various stuff.
Come on, I think you missed about 80% of that.
Oh, I probably have. I have a philosophy of not trying to make slides too busy.
Yeah, sounds fair.
But I think some of this stuff is like Look at the variables that we've got here. It's just crazy. Actually, this is my favorite picture from Loic. I don't know if is this an actual diagram?
It is an actual diagram.
I think the first time we saw this diagram, you had it on the big screen, but we still couldn't follow it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
So again, don't expect you to be able to read this. It's completely unreadable. And it shows the complexity of dealing with all these various live streams to so many different destinations with so many different variables. How can we possibly manage this? You know, in a lot of cases, I think it's fair to say that, and again, this was shocking to me as well, that very large media organizations are dealing with this manually because it's impossible to deal with in an automated way.
I don't know how they're doing. I'm going to put Loic on the spot here for a minute, Loic, if you don't mind.
You may not want to admit how they dealt with.
I'm going to tell you how we deal with it. I don't sleep at night. I keep saying it, but I'm going to go back to this. And that's the truth. It's, you know, those distribution paths and configuration are so complex and they're so unique that, you know, from a monetization point of view, it's an issue because now you're duplicating your infrastructure. You need to have a lot of engineers behind the scene to manage that. And the provisioning is the same thing. You know, there was the old AT&T model. There's a reason why on the street you see those telephone poles that have all those wires on it. Because every time you need to do something, you're going to run a new line. Because it's much easier to run the new line than go to try to fix the one that is there or reuse it. This is the same thing here. You know, in many cases we said, can we reuse one of the streams that exists? Well, it's like, no, because there is going to be a problem somewhere. We may as well just, you know, start from the beginning of the streams and go all the way to the end distribution there. That's the same thing. By standardizing the variations, by standardizing some of the configurations, I expect that diagram is something that we can actually read. So.
Now, if we look future looking, everybody wants multi-streams at home. So you've got to distribute live streams. The end user wants to select the live stream he wants. How do you define that? Because every distributor is going to do that differently.
A classic example is one that's near and dear to our hearts, Loic. It's like the Formula One use case, where you've got a camera in every single car, and the consumer at home can select what view they want. So everybody has a different experience. Just one use case of it. And so, you know, again, this problem is bigger than we can even imagine when you start to deal with that. And as consumers embrace that type of choice and enjoy it, I think, you know, this gets even worse.
Well, you have a multiplication factor there, okay? Because now you're not doing it for one stream, you're doing it for many streams. This is the reason why Formula One is only doing it for two platforms and two platforms only. One is their own and operated app experience, and the second one is Sky. I actually spoke to Formula One about this and asked them if there was a chance that they would actually deploy that to other, you know, distributors. The answer was clear. I'm not going to repeat it.
Big no, right? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think there was.
I can't even imagine a frequency management in a Formula One race, much less distributing, you know, camera feeds like this.
So we're down to just our last minute or so here. So, you know, there's always has to be a call to action at the end of this, right? And so, you know, I hope this wasn't all doom and gloom. We're here because we're trying to find solutions to this. And, you know, my call to action personally would be if you want to be part of the solution, we would love to have you join up with us in the SMPTE RIS.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rebecca.
And you know, this is just some of the stuff that we're aiming to do to try to solve this. And so we do have a plan. But this doesn't write itself, right? And SMPTE is not an organization that authors stuff itself. It's a venue where we can bring together interested parties, and it only happens when you've got a group of volunteers who are feeling the pain and want to solve it. And so, this is a fairly small group right now, And the reason we're up here in front of you is, we'd like to make it a larger group and have a larger voice collectively, to say as an industry, this is a problem we need to solve, and we think we have a way to do it.
Yeah. The reason why I'm heavily involved in this project is this is not a lab experiment, to be clear. I have absolutely no interest of working on that for 10 years. I need result, and I need result very, very soon.
All right. Well, with that, I really thank everybody very much for joining us here on the last afternoon of the show. Wish you a good rest of the show, and
thank you.